Again, if you have any questions, please feel free to use the question panel on the toolbar to your right, and Kurt will field any and all questions after the webinar. So with that, Kurt, take it away.
Great. Thank you, Sean. Again, we really want to make this useful for you, so I want to first of all welcome you and say thank you for attending. We look forward to reaching out in questions toward the end of this presentation, so please feel free to use that interface on the right-hand side. We also hope that we'll hear from you. We hope today to inspire you on some of the opportunities that are out there in parking. So with that, I'm going to step through a quick presentation to give you a quick overview of some of the thoughts that we're doing. As mentioned, my name is Kurt Buecheler. I've been around Silicon Valley for about 35 years, and I've done a number of different companies in the Valley, but very excited about parking. There's a tremendous opportunity around innovation that we can offer, and so I represent Streetline to much of the parking industry, as well as the auto industry, mapping industry, and thinking about those kinds of things. The opportunity really is to bring smart parking to a world that is really growing and nicely advancing. So some of the things we're going to look at today are what innovation is first happening outside of parking, then we'll go into what's happening inside parking and where are some of the opportunities. So if we look at transportation as an example, safety in the last 50 years has made a tremendous amount of progress in how cars are built, the equipment that comes on them, and the total safety that's out there. Navigation started with maybe a map looking out over a horizon, but eventually connected devices became to creep into those cars and empowered people to be able to put in a destination and get guidance of where is my destination. In the same way, traffic started with just helicopters over the sky, and eventually new technologies came around to make that more accessible to more people, and thus made it much, much easier. Well, there's also technologies that are going on more recently. Google has now completed 300,000 miles of accident-free driving of a car that has no driver, and it even completed a San Francisco to Vegas one nonstop drive except for stopping for gas. Again, you know, cars are getting smarter, they're getting connected, and they're going to have more and more data for navigation, for safety, even for driving themselves. Toyota is doing the same thing. They have a driverless car as well, but they also have facial recognition that can replace access to the car, so that a car can do different things when a valet driver is doing the driving versus a driver versus a child, a less than adult driver. And Ford has been doing parallel parking for quite some time. So there's really quite a bit of innovation that is coming to the aid of drivers around driving, around navigation, around guidance. In the same way, payments, there's been a tremendous amount of change in how people are paying for things. People can pay for things more quickly and much more conveniently. And within the parking industry, Park Mobile and Pay by Phone are doing some great innovations in terms of how they make parking payable more easily. It's a safer environment where you can pay from inside your car, day or night, wherever it might be. And as prices go up for meters, it gets to be a lot more convenient to pay, you know, $6 for via your smartphone rather than trying to look for all that change, or do it outside with your credit card outside of your hand. So, in addition to those companies, though, looking back, there are actually a little over 50. I put some of them down here, but there's a little over 50 companies that are starting to deal with mobile payments in one way or another. Some are big companies like Google Wallet and Citibank and things like that, but there's a number of others that have gotten a tremendous amount of trajectory. And I look at this and say, well, somebody's going to get it right. Somebody's going to do this, and I think several companies will, in making it easy, fast, and convenient for you to pay for parking, but also to pay for other things. And we think that's really an exciting world that makes it easier in a smart, connected city world. So we're also seeing consumer adoption. Consumers are accepting these payments. So whether we look at Starbucks that has over 1 million people a week, whether we look at the number of total payments being, you know, $12 to $13 billion already spent last year via the smartphones. And that's predicted to grow very, very fast in the coming years. Meanwhile, over 200 locations offer parking guidance and or mobile payment. We'll take a look at that closer in another slide. And 10 billion payments annually from Square. So there's a tremendous amount of consumer adoption that says, yes, this is easier, this is better, this is faster. So we see that the industry is pushing the supply of payments down, and the consumers are reacting very, very nicely. Meanwhile, we're getting more data. When people want to manage their business better, the number one thing they need to do is get data. To understand a hotel or real estate or a plane or a train, we have to know where those assets are, what they're doing, if they're occupied, what they're priced at. And one aspect of technology that's getting very interesting is sensors. Sensors are going into the healthcare industry, into the transportation industry, and yes, even into the parking industry. So you look at major companies and what they're doing, all the way down to companies like ours, Streetline, and we're creating sensors to help automate the process of getting around a city or running a business or manufacturing. And these sensors can be as small, as you can see in the upper right, they can be as small as a fraction of a little penny, and they can do all kinds of different technology or observations and data capture, or they can be specifically for parking. Parking, the one you see in the lower right, is actually closer to the size of a hockey puck. It goes in the pavement and says, is a car here or not? And it has great application for on-street parking. So from there, we can actually capture data and say, where is parking? And we can know if a car is present. We know what the occupancy is. From that, we can then communicate that data out to a city, to police, to safety, to planning, and out to consumers so they can find parking. So it's a really great opportunity to take a system that is really nascent in that I don't know where parking is, I don't know if cars are parked in those spaces, I don't know what the price is, and to answer all those questions for the consumer. So let's take a little bit more of a click down on where innovations are happening inside parking. So first of all, what's really historically gone on? Not much has changed in the parking in the last 50, 60, 70, even 80 years. Meters came along around 80, 85 years ago, and they haven't changed all that much. And what we're looking at is while planes and trains and real estate and all these industries have advanced, and the technology to automate those industries has advanced, parking has been a little bit of a laggard. But those technologies can now be applied to really quickly improve the way that consumers park and how the cities and private parking manage and optimize that parking real estate and that parking opportunity. The impact of that is not just revenue for a city or for private parking, it's also on congestion, on making a city more friendly to cars, but also making it more friendly to pedestrians and to bicyclists. Because when people park quickly, we get more cars off the road more quickly, and it calms the streets. So one of the things that is a real challenge is how do we think of parking? When the average consumer, I think all of us would agree, when we park, we start to say, I left from one point and I went on to another point, my destination. It's an A to B journey. But in fact, it really isn't A to B. It's A to B to C. I have to park my car, and then I have to go to the destination where my business meeting is or whatever it might be. But how is that really done? I think of this in two steps. I first drive to the real C destination where I need to go, and then I start a second process of looking around with no information necessarily on price, on location, on availability, and that becomes a second step that can take anywhere from 18 to 20 minutes in most major cities. Meanwhile, that opportunity is to say, if we could provide people with perfect access of information, we can then say, well, actually, the best parking alternative for me is before I get to my destination. So I'll pull over to the right, park, pay my money, and then continue walking onto my destination. With that, whether it's left or right or beyond the destination or right in front of the destination, as I've illustrated here, people can then find parking quickly, saving them a tremendous amount of time and a tremendous amount of gas. Did you know that a car emits 10% of its total carbon while it's parking in today's world? And that's another opportunity to improve the environment, not just revenue, not just congestion, but also saving time and saving carbon. So change is coming, as mentioned. There's a lot of technological advances that are advancing almost all industries in making a smart city, smart manufacturing, smart transportation. And parking is ripe for some interesting opportunities. In fact, if we look at not just all the startup companies, we look at major companies out there that are multi-billion-dollar industries themselves. What are they doing? They're all identifying that parking really matters. They're coming out with smart city applications, but they're also starting to say 3 or 4 out of the 5 companies we researched said, yes, parking is a big deal. Parking is a critical part of a smart city, a critical part of transportation, and it's a real opportunity for us to innovate. So I think there'll be many more companies like SAP and Orange and Telefonica that's already listed. They'll be coming along with more and more products and more services to help a city be smart, but also help consumers get around. So real solutions coming along from the major companies, but there's also a lot of startup companies that are starting around parking. Some of them are dealing with payment, as we mentioned earlier. Some are dealing with reservations, trying to help around the ballpark. Some are dealing with occupancy, like StreetLine. Some are yellow pages of off-street parking directories, that sort of thing. So there's a wide variety, but many of these companies are doing great work, and as they come together and start to collaborate with those bigger companies and with themselves, there's a real opportunity. Meanwhile, the cities are also responding. There's over 200 companies, there's 200 cities, that are doing some sort of test with a smart city. It's specifically dealing with either guidance of how to find parking or payment, how to pay for parking. So there's a lot of action going on. There really is a tremendous amount of momentum from the industry to say, we think this is an opportunity. Large industry believes it, startups believe it, the cities believe it, and I think even the consumers are starting to attract that as well and say it really does work better when you can provide people information on their car, in their phone, voice guidance, whatever it might be. So what does this mean? What happens next? We've got a lot of momentum in smart cities. We've got a lot of momentum specifically in parking innovations. What do we do? Well, step one, when we will deal with both off-street parking, parking garages and parking lots, generally a private parking company, or we deal with cities, we have one big recommendation, and that's get data. Right now, you don't know where parking is. You don't know how many people are in your parking spots. So we come in with solutions that help them capture information about how many people are in those parking spots. If you think about parking, it's really a real estate service. And we're selling real estate to people who own cars who need to leave their car for some reason. And it's a vital and large chunk of real estate for a city. They have buildings, they have streets, and that's pretty much all they have other than a few parks. So it's a real opportunity for them to help manage this real estate and for the private parking to rent. So, and whether this is a city or whether this is private parking or whether it's a campus is in our view, a very small city. And they're all dealing with the same assets that say, we have lots of parking lots, lots of parking garages, lots of on-street parking, and we don't know what's going on there. So what do we do? StreetLine, I want to give you a quick overview of StreetLine, then we'll get to your questions. StreetLine offers an integrated data platform. That's that green bar that you see in the top, where we bring both on-street parking information, the on the curb, at the meter, and off-street parking from the garage and from the parking lots, and bring that data together. And that's fairly unique. There are a lot of companies that are trying to capture data for the parking garages, essentially building a yellow pages for parking garages. StreetLine is fairly unique in that we do that, but we also do this on-street parking of saying where are the parking locations, what is the occupancy, is space available, and ultimately then we can bring that data together. So ParkSight on the lower left is optimized as a product built for cities and for anybody who's managing private or on-street parking. And that includes private companies that are doing partnerships, public-private partnerships, where they come in and manage. Maybe there's a private company that comes in to manage parking for a city. And that's true in many cities around America. It's getting to be more and more popular. So we have a product that really is optimized for that on-street, on-the-curb parking. Park Edge is optimized for the off-street parking. When we have on-street parking, every single space has its own entrance and its own exit. But in off-street parking, we have a constrained entrance, and it really is a different set of challenges that the operator is dealing with and how they optimize their business. But we have a product optimized for them. Then you have Parker. Parker is the first instance of making that data of where is parking available on street and where is parking available off street, and making it available to the consumer so they can make quick decisions saying, I see that parking lot is sold out, that parking lot's available. If I turn left, I will see it's all red, I will see no parking. If I turn right, it's all green. Great. We can give them quick guidance, and we can make that available on the web. We can make it available in private apps, in other people's apps. We can make it available in widgets, all sorts of ways to distribute that. And we're even testing right now with our parking data being injected into an automobile so that people can see it right on their dash. So first of all, now taking a step back from that introduction, saying, how do we do this? Well, we capture data. We capture data in several ways. One, in the upper left, you see a sensor, again, that little hockey puck looking device, and that's a battery-operated device that lasts 5 years on 2 lithium batteries. It actually can report in as frequently as every 12 seconds and say, is a car here or not? It's very unique in that it sends a magnetic image of what it sees above it to our servers, and our servers interpret it on that side. So many of the sensors out there will say a car is here or is not here, and you have to trust that that sensor is making the right decision. We, on the other hand, send that image over to the servers and to the data center and make the determination there, and we get smarter and smarter and smarter. And that's how we're achieving as high as 98.5% accuracy of our sensors saying, is a car here? And it's a little challenging to get higher than that because people have different cars and they park different ways. But we're doing a great job of constantly getting higher and higher and higher reliability. Now, we also can take data from other sources, such as loops. You see in the lower left, an inductive loop that might be sunk into an entrance of a parking garage or into pavement on the street. We can take data from that and say, is a car here or not? Gates. Gates can tell us a great deal of saying, well, I have 1,000 spots and 500 cars have come in, so how many spots are left? Well, 500. So we can get rough data. Those are not perfect devices, but they're pretty good. And we can take data from that as well. And then eventually we have some tests going on with algorithmic looks of cameras, saying let's take a camera, point it down on a street, on a parking lot, and say, is a car there? In those 5 spaces, there's 3 cars present or 1 car present. So there's a number of ways to capture information, and StreetLine is a broad platform that allows us to capture data from many, many different sources. Now, once we have that data, we have an opportunity to do some interesting things with it. First, for the enterprise, which could be the university or for the city. So we can first say, how do we make this data available so it's easy to understand? Here's some examples of how we present that information to the city. The first one on the upper left is something we call Park Site. And Park Site is an application that takes that data, puts it on a map, and gives the city an idea of where the parking is available and where it's not available by hour or even minute. So they can say, I understand that Monday, Wednesday, Friday is busier than Tuesday, Thursday, evenings or weekends or whatever it might be. They get perfect occupancy and can start to make some planning decisions of saying, what's the right policy? What's the right pricing? We see when people put the StreetLine parking solution in, they get perfect occupancy across that all those streets, and they can now say, what's the right price to optimize both congestion and smooth traffic as well as optimize revenue. And they see revenue go up because people can find the spaces. They see occupancy go up, and thus more people are buying hours on the street, so revenue goes up that way. But they also can set the price correctly to meet their goals. If they want revenue, they can optimize it so that there's always spaces available on the street, but they're optimizing their revenue. So they'll see On average, they can increase the revenue per hour by finding the places in the busy places in the city where they can improve their revenue or increase the revenue per hour and thus improve their revenue. But also, when people know that there's a smart parking system involved, there's a couple things that happen. One, compliance goes up. That is, compliance is the number of people who park in a space and actually pay rather than walk away from their car. So we're seeing about a 10% increase in revenue just because more people pay and less people walk away from their car without taking the chance. And then fourth, we'll see revenue improve from smart enforcement. The yin and yang of this is that we will help people find parking, we'll help them pay mobily, and if they still don't want to pay, we can take people in enforcement who were just as blind as the parking consumers and say, here's where cars are parked, but a meter is not paid. And the idea is not to be a big brother. The idea is to actually manage that real estate so that you optimize revenue, but also so you start to get people to quickly pay and move their cars and not leave them there day after day. So it makes the city work better. And we can provide reports. So you see in the lower right, whether it's point of entrance, when do they leave, what is the occupancy, that sort of thing. You can get a whole 20 and 30 and 40 different reports about what's going on in your garage or what's going on in your lot or what's going on in the streets. So this is another way to consume it as well. Enforcement, we touched on that quickly. We can show it on a computer in the upper left, that first screenshot we showed. The second actually is to put that same data on a car so that people can drive around and say, well, let me find where the violations are actually present. And then we even can help track and say, oh no, there's a handicap or an ADA compliant car parked in that space, and that will alert all other enforcement people to not worry about that space, that it actually is legally parked. Or there's a government vehicle or a utility vehicle again, making the system smarter and helping people be more productive. In some of the cities we work with, they have quadrupled the number of citations per person per hour. So it's been very, very effective in them helping manage up from 10%, let's say, enforcement, where they're writing tickets for about 10% of the violations, maybe to 15 or even 18%, where it starts to cause not only improve revenue, it starts to cause a change in consumer behavior where they're compliant. So another aspect that we managed was something called Park Edge. Park Edge allows the parking operator who's running a garage or a lot to optimize their business, to communicate with consumers and really help them find more consumers and find more revenue. So first, in the upper left, you see they have a dashboard that they can put all their locations on and manage those locations, bring them together. They can also generate reports of what was my occupancy and start to deal with compliance with their own staff, saying how many cars were really there. They can push out coupons, they can push out reservations to consumers, and they can even tell the consumer what is their availability. You see in the lower right, we can actually communicate that it's red, I'm sold out, and advise to go to an alternate location that I might own or operate, or green and come on in. We can dynamically price and update those in seconds. So if I think I have a lot of capacity, I may want to lower my price for the day. I now have a vehicle to reach out, a method to reach out to drivers and say, my parking is normally $15 a day, now it's $12. Are you interested? If they want to secure a reservation, they can do that. If it's high demand time, they can also mark it up, normally $15, today it's $22. And they have a vehicle to do that communication with consumers. As mentioned, then once we have that data, all this on-street parking and all this off-street parking data, then we can start to push it out to consumers. And we have guidance apps that work on Apple, on Android, and we'll do other applications as they become popular. But we also have a full set of data feeds that can be fed in to an in-car navigation system, as you see in the middle on the bottom, or a mobile device, a PND or a personal navigation device. We also have website applications where you can take your restaurant, type in the address on our website, and then generate code that you can put on your website, and it will add a map to your website and put your location, your restaurant, your law firm, your flower shop, and put it on the map, and then surround it with parking. and say, here's real-time access to what is the real-time availability of parking around my facility, around my business. Or that data can be also fed to signs you see in the lower right. So we take this, to capture all this data, and then we make it very available for our app, for your app, for somebody else's app, to integrate it in those things, to make it on all the different devices, and then even put it onto the web. So at the end of the day, data rules. Data is king. Data has made American Express or American Airlines all very, very well-run companies. They know what's going on, and we're seeking to bring that to the parking industry, both on-street and off-street. We think with that data, with that knowledge, the right decisions can be made to get the pricing and the policy set right, to optimize meters, to set the right limits that empower business. Turns out when you do smart parking, you're not just making the streets work better and making the parking work better, you're also making it a better business environment for those restaurants and those flower shops and those law firms that are on the other side of the sidewalk and are trying to attract people, because they can make a reservation or they can give people guidance, where's parking near my facility? And so it's easier to come to your business and do business. So better enforcement, just one of the many things that we do, but it's a critical element to make a city work. If there are no laws, there is no guide, there's no sense in a city's operations. And so enforcement is a better, important thing, and making that workforce that does that service, making them more productive, can make the city much more efficient and effective. They can even be much more fair, because they can say, we'll have a courtesy policy that no tickets for 30 minutes after violation once it gets to 31 minutes. So those kinds of models are friendlier to the parking customers, but also help the city manage its assets. So the consumer obviously wins when they can go from having no idea. I often characterize it as a blind squirrel looking for a nut. When they can go from no knowledge of where is parking, where is available, what is the price, to that full knowledge of knowing exactly where parking is, exactly what the price is, and where is their space, they're well ahead in their journey. You know, smart traffic is important, but we think that smart parking may just be more important in its ability to save you time, save you gas, save you money, save you carbon, all those good things. Now, that becomes that data platform, and that availability starts to become a platform, and that platform upon which you can build applications on top of our solution, or we can build applications on top of that solution. Things like reservations, promotions, coupons, to guide where there's extra parking for an event, to guide where there's no parking today because of construction. So literally a city can take a street that has construction and mark all the parking red, even though there's no cars in those spaces. And that's a communication tool that helps people avoid that particular street and not have to make the last minute corrections. They say, oh, that street's closed, there's no parking, great, I'll be happy to do that. So that's a quick overview of us. You know, the response has been quite popular. We have deployments I'll cover in a minute, but in over 30 cities, and some of them are optimized around congestion. They just want to calm the city. Others are about improving revenue. Others are about bringing buses and trains and cars into a collaboration. So in those senses, the data that we have can be used to get people off the highway into parking lots and onto the train, or it can be make people, just help them find parking quickly so we calm the city down, or, you know, as mentioned, improve city revenue. So what's been going on with us? We've been very, very successful because we're very unique. We are the only company that really is doing both on-street and off-street parking, and doing it in a primary research way where we have sensors that capture information in both those locations. We're now in 30 cities and universities around North America. Some are very large deployments of thousands and thousands of sensors. Others are tests where they may have just a few hundred in. But they're all growing and all going quite well. We now have established a European operation. We have 2 cities live and 5 deals signed. We have more deals coming along. So we're starting to grow to Europe, and that's another very, very positive market for us. We started a couple of years ago with partners like Citi, Siemens, Xerox, and IBM, and in the last 12 months we've added partnerships with people like Telefonica, Cisco, and Amano McGann. So we also just recently announced McKay Meters has joined us in a partnership as well. So that pool is growing nicely where people want to partner because we capture smart data, and that's a critical thing that all those cities can use. We had a couple hundred articles written about us in 2010, about 350 articles written about us in 2011, and in 2012 we had 486 articles written about us. So that's about one and a half per every day, or almost 2 per business day. So been a lot of hype around smart parking, and people generally believe that StreetLine's positioned well to really bring a complete solution to market. We recently raised $25 million of funding from companies like Qualcomm, Citibank, Bill Ford, and many others. We also were offered $25 million of additional funding to use as credit to help cities and private parking use our services but have financing around it. And we've shipped several new versions of all our different products and launched 4 new products this past year. So that's kind of a quick overview. Really would be great. I'm going to invite Sean to look at the interface and see if there's been any questions entered. But would encourage you, if you have questions, please let us know what they are. So Sean, are there any questions in so far?
Great, thanks, Kurt. I just want to first thank you for taking the time out to present all this information to us. And we do have a few questions that have come in. The first one is, what is the role that you see, a technology like StreetLines taking in models where privatization of parking assets and resources are occurring?
All right, so the question really is about privatization, maybe cities and private parking working together. So there's a growing trend for cities to look at the total cost of operating parking and to look at, is there a more efficient way to do this? The city of Indianapolis has done this. Chicago's done it. New York is looking at it. A number of cities are. In the case of Indianapolis, they published a white paper and a video where the mayor said, I used to net out in profit $100,000 a year in parking after I paid all my people and all the fully burdened costs. Then I outsourced it to a combination of StreetLine and Xerox. And since then, I now receive $1.4 million per year in parking revenue, and I have no employees to manage. I have no retirement plans to fund. It's all pure profit. So there's what's known as P3 or PPP, public-private partnerships. And what we've found is that the private industry has a tremendous interest in these opportunities to go manage public parking because they can dramatically improve the performance for the city, for the consumer, for everyone. And they look at StreetLine and say, there's a really interesting set of technologies that help really bring better management to that on-street parking. So they come in, and they will guarantee the city higher revenue, and they will do that and still make a tremendous amount of additional uplift in revenue. So the cities work better, the city is making more money, and the private companies are actually taking a lot of burden off those public organizations that don't really have a core expertise. So that brings us, many of these large parking companies are the key delivery vehicles. You see both companies like Xerox, ACS that does a lot of service to the parking industry, and the private parking companies themselves are both saying, we know how to manage parking. Let us do it. We'll make it work better. So we're simply a platform, in this case, where those organizations use it to bring smart parking to a city and help make it a better managed operation.
Great, thanks, Kurt. So next question we have here is, are there concerns with using a cell phone while driving to find parking? Which I guess is a really great question. I think that you can help address, Kurt.
Well, that's a very good question. That's a very broad question. The industry is certainly laboring with distracted driving. That's a real problem. and certainly people who are talking are somewhat distracted. People who are texting are severely distracted, and that's a real problem that has to be addressed. By the same token, people have also been using navigation and looking at a screen for a lot of years. And the industry is coming together and is establishing standards. This issue, I would say, is bigger than Streetline. We generate data around parking, and we do have a mobile app that does comply with distracted driver guidelines today. But we know those rules are going to continue to evolve, and the cell phone industry is very involved, the auto industry is very involved, the navigation and mapping businesses are very, very involved, and the government's very involved because it is such an important issue. We provide this data, and we can provide this data to Apple, to Google, to all these other companies, and they can then look at their policies of how they meet the evolving guidelines around distracted driving. And it may end up being that parking is not presented on a screen, but simply there's a car that speaks to you that says parking available, turn left on A Street, whatever it might be. So the industry is going to deal with this. We're hard at work capturing data of how to manage that real estate well, what's going on in those spaces, capture that data and make it available. We'll make it available to auto OEMs, to cities, to mapping companies. And we will be part of that solution in dealing with how those standards are set, but there's going to be a much larger group of people who are setting standards for distracted driver. Our data actually, we believe, is part of the solution, because when somebody is driving around and around and around in circles for anywhere from 10, 15, even 20 minutes, they're quite distracted, and they're just adding a lot of congestion. And the more cars on a street, the more likely somebody's going to miss a bicyclist, or there's just going to be too much compression on the streets and there's accidents. So we do believe that smart parking is part of the solution. Getting that data is part of the solution and critical to getting people off the road quickly, and that has a macro impact of just lowering the congestion on those cities. But boy, oh boy, it's a really good question, and the industry each year is looking at it harder and dealing with it more and more. We do think we're long-term compatible, though, with any solution that the government comes up with.
Great. So another question that came in, which is a really good question. Are there any examples of deploying the sensor technology in unpainted or undemarcated parking spaces?
As a matter of fact, we have done tests with both undemarcated and demarcated, or demarcated being where you have the space lines on the pavement. And so we've been very effective at a couple things. One, we've been able to show that we can offer guidance to people even when there is not demarcations or lines painted on the streets. We've also, though, in a very large city, shown how we were able to, and I think an example, New York City is demarcated in some areas, and we have a test going on in New York City with that area. In that area, we were able to show that we could provide a few more sensors and provide the same kind of guidance even in undemarcated. But I'll tell you an interesting thing. We did a test in an undemarcated area and a demarcated area, and the city felt that they expected that the undemarcated would have more density and thus more revenue. And we showed that with the guidance that we offer, we generated more revenue from spaces, set spaces where there were lines drawn. So where there were demarcated spaces, we showed higher revenue. But the answer is absolutely yes. We work in both demarcated and undemarcated spaces and can be very effective in increasing revenue and increasing guidance to the parking consumer.
Great. And then the last question that we have here, Kurt, and I believe you touched on this a little bit during the presentation, but perhaps you could dive into it a bit more, is how do you derive a return on investment for the sensor deployments?
Okay. So money, where's the money? That's a very good question. So when we go into a city for on-street or into a parking lot for off-street, that sense of getting data is very, very informative. It's very, very helpful. And when we come in, typically a city does not know often they may not even know their current parking policy or their parking revenue or rates for every aspect of the city. That's very, very difficult to keep track of. So what we provide is a system where they can put in their parking locations, and then we provide them occupancy reports back by space or by street. And they can say, oh, this place is 100% full 100% of the time. And this place is 80% full. This place is 20% full. In the case of Los Angeles, they had one-size-fits-all pricing. They had $2 an hour in the most industrial, unused areas, and some of them, the Hollywood was the same price. And so this gave them an ability to say, well, gee, in the downtown areas, these streets are the most compressed, and they went from $2 an hour everywhere to anywhere as cheap as 50 cents per hour to as high as $5 per hour. So they went from one pricing for everywhere to a range of 10 times the parking, 50 cents to $5. And so now the interesting thing where the ROI comes from is, one, consumer occupancy can go up because people can find those nooks and crannies of parking, even in the busy areas. They can find the nooks and crannies a block or 2 blocks or even 3 blocks away where parking is available. So more people get into spaces, more people pay. 2, that pricing can be optimized. So on average, San Francisco adjusted pricing and kept about the same average. Some places went down, some places went up. In the case of Los Angeles, some of the prices came down, some went up, but their average price went up. So they're now selling more hours through that occupancy and selling more per hour on average. So they're, again, generating more revenue. The third area of ROI and justifying the costs are compliance. More people are actually paying. As mentioned, compliance is one where people do park their car and do pay rather than parking their car and not paying. And so we see compliance going up about 10%. And then smart enforcement. In some cities, we've seen half the number of enforcement people generate twice the number of enforcement tickets. So revenue goes up dramatically. We are generally a source of revenue to a city, not a source of expense. The smart parking and all the navigation comes along almost as a free opportunity. So if there's other questions, please feel free to type in more if I haven't answered your question.
Great.
Are there other questions?
So it looks like that is everything. Again, if you guys have any other questions, feel free to email Kurt. His email is on the screen in front of you. It's kurt@streetline.com. And again, if you need...
yeah, happy to help. It's been a real pleasure. Thank you so much for joining us. Hopefully you find the information, some of the facts and the factoids interesting and useful. I also hope you appreciate and find the overview of some of these parking trends and specifically StreetLine solutions. I hope you find it interesting and that you'll reach out to us and say, hey, I'd like to know more. We'd love to tell you more if you're interested. So we're going to say now, so thank you very much again for attending, and for now, I guess I'll let you close it up, Sean.
Yep. Great. Thanks, everyone. If you would like a copy of this presentation, feel free to email me at Sean@streetline.com. Again, that's SEAN@streetline.com. Thank you very much, and have a great day.
Thank you. Bye-bye.